The drive from Wichita took 4 hours through flat country that seemed to repeat itself every 10 miles. Wheat fields, grain elevators, water towers, fence posts. I passed through towns with populations under 300, their main streets reduced to a gas station and a church, and whatever else had survived the last 50 years. My grandfather had lived out here for 62 years. I'd visited twice as a child, both times in summer, both times brief. I remembered the heat and the silence and very little else. The lawyer's office had been in Topeka, a small firm operating out of a converted house near the Capitol building. Harold Muncie, my grandfather's attorney for the last 30 years, had handed me an envelope containing a key, a hand-drawn map, and a single sheet of paper folded into thirds. "Your grandfather was specific about the order," Muncie had said. "Read the paper after you arrive, not before." I'd asked him what that meant. He'd looked at me with something I couldn't identify. Not pity, not warning, something closer to resignation. And said only that my grandfather had been a practical man who did things for practical reasons. The inheritance itself was simple. The farm, 160 acres of mixed pasture and wheat ground. The house, a 2-story structure built in 1919. The outbuildings, a barn, a machine shed, a grain bin, and something the deed called the old dairy house that I didn't remember seeing as a child. There was also a modest bank account, enough to pay the property taxes for 3 years if I was careful. Muncie had suggested I could sell it all within 6 months if I found a buyer. But the land market in that part of Kansas had been slow for a decade. I didn't tell him I had no intention of selling. I didn't tell him that I'd lost my apartment in Denver 2 months earlier, that my savings were exhausted, that the farm was the only thing I owned that couldn't be repossessed. I thanked him and drove east into the afternoon sun. The mailbox appeared at 4:47 p.m., exactly where the hand-drawn map indicated. Carver, it read. The letters faded, but legible. The driveway was gravel, packed hard, running straight north for a 1/4 mile before curving around a windbreak of cedars. The house emerged from behind the trees like something from a photograph. White clapboard, green shutters, a wraparound porch with a swing that moved slightly in the wind, though no one sat in it. I parked beside a detached garage that hadn't been on the map. The key fit the front door without resistance. Inside, the house smelled like dust and old paper and something faintly chemical, like the residue of cleaning supplies applied years ago. The furniture was covered in white sheets. The windows were intact. The electricity worked when I tried the switch in the front hall. I found the light switch in the kitchen and stood there for a moment, taking inventory. Refrigerator, empty but running. Gas stove, old but functional. A calendar on the wall, frozen at March of the current year. 2 months before my grandfather had died. A telephone on the wall, the kind with a cord, which surprised me because I'd assumed landlines were extinct in places like this. I picked up the receiver and heard a dial tone. The paper was still in my jacket pocket. I unfolded it at the kitchen table as the sun dropped toward the horizon outside, casting long shadows across the wheat fields, visible through the west-facing window. My grandfather's handwriting was small and precise. The letters formed with the careful attention of a man who'd learned to write before typewriters were common in rural schools. The paper was dated 3 weeks before his death. Thomas, if you're reading this, you've decided to stay. I expected you might. You always were stubborn in the way your father was stubborn, which is the same way I was stubborn, which is the only way anyone survives out here for long. The farm will provide for you if you provide for it. There is work to do and money to be made if you learn the rhythms. But there are other rhythms here that you must learn first, and these are not optional. Enclosed, you will find a second document. Read it completely before dark. Follow it exactly. Do not deviate. Do not assume you understand the reasons. Do not test the boundaries. The rules are not suggestions, and they are not superstition. They are the result of 62 years of observation, and the cost of learning them was paid by people who cannot pay anything further. The rules are keeping me alive. If you follow them, they will keep you alive too. I am sorry I cannot explain more. Explanation requires understanding, and I do not understand. I only know what works. Your grandfather, Earl Carver I, turned the paper over. On the back, in the same careful handwriting, was a numbered list. 1. The doors must be locked by sundown, all of them. The front door, the back door, the basement door, the door to the old dairy house. Check each lock twice. The order does not matter, but the completion does. 2. Between sundown and sunrise, do not answer the door for any reason. If someone knocks, do not respond. If someone calls your name, do not respond. If someone claims to need help, do not respond. The telephone may be answered at any hour, but the door may not be opened until full sunrise, which in summer is approximately 5:45 in the morning, and in winter is approximately 7:30 in the morning. 3. The lights in the upstairs hallway must remain off between 2:15 in the morning and 2:50 in the morning. Do not enter the upstairs hallway during this window. If you are already upstairs when 2:15 arrives, remain in your room with the door closed until 2:50 has passed. 4. The northwest corner of the barn contains a door that leads to a small room. Do not open this door. Do not look through the gap beneath this door. If you hear sounds from behind this door, leave the barn immediately and do not return until daylight. 5. The old dairy house is approximately 80 yards southeast of the main house. Do not enter the old dairy house after dark. Before dark, you may enter only to retrieve supplies from the shelves on the north wall. Do not approach the drain in the floor. Do not speak while inside. 6. If you see a figure standing in the wheat field after sunset, do not observe it for more than 3 seconds. Look away. Return indoors. Do not attempt to identify the figure. Do not wave or signal. Do not call out. 7. The radio in the study operates on 4 frequencies. Channel 1 is the county sheriff. Channel 2 is the local fire department. Channel 3 is the agricultural extension office. Channel 4 is marked but receives only static. Do not tune the radio to Channel 4 between midnight and 4 in the morning. If the radio tunes itself to Channel 4, turn the radio off completely and do not touch it again until sunrise. 8. Once per month, on the night of the new moon, you will hear footsteps circling the house. They will begin at approximately 11:40 in the evening and continue until approximately 3:20 in the morning. During this period, remain on the first floor, away from windows. Do not attempt to count the footsteps. Do not attempt to track their direction. They will complete their circuit without incident if you do not observe them. 9. The basement may be entered during daylight hours only. The chain on the basement door is not decorative. If you descend to the basement, the chain must be secured behind you from the inside. The mechanism for this is a hook on the interior wall to the left of the door. Do not descend to the basement without first securing the chain. 10. The well is located 32 yards due west of the back porch. The water is potable but should be boiled before drinking. Do not draw water from the well after sunset. If you require water during night hours, use only the water stored in the jugs in the kitchen pantry. These jugs should be refilled each morning. 11. The tree line at the northern boundary of the property is exactly 140 yards from the back of the barn. Do not approach within 40 yards of this tree line after sunset. Do not approach within 40 yards of this tree line if you observe any animal emerging from it that walks backward or moves without disturbing the grass. 12. Certain nights, you may hear a child crying somewhere outside the house. There are no children on this property. There are no children within 3 miles of this property. The sound is not a child. Do not investigate. 13. The cellar door on the east side of the house leads to a root cellar separate from the basement. This cellar may be used for storage and is safe at all hours. Do not confuse it with the basement. The cellar door is painted red. The basement door is painted white. If you observe that these colors have reversed, do not enter either door until you have confirmed the reversal is not a trick of the light. Wait for full daylight and check again. 14. If any rule becomes impossible to follow due to circumstances beyond your control, proceed to the study on the first floor, close the door, and remain there until sunrise. The study is the safest room in the house. The walls are double thickness. The window faces south. Keep the curtains drawn and do not open them for any reason until morning. I read the list 3 times. Outside, the sun was touching the horizon, painting the wheat fields in shades of orange and gold. I looked at my watch. 7:23 p.m. Sunset was perhaps 15 minutes away. I did not believe in ghosts. I did not believe in monsters. I did not believe in rules written by a dead man about things that could not exist. But I had driven 4 hours to reach this place, and I had nowhere else to go. And my grandfather had been a practical man his entire life. A farmer for 62 years. A man who fixed what was broken and discarded what could not be fixed. A man who did not waste words. I stood up from the kitchen table and began checking the doors. The front door was already locked from when I'd entered. I checked it again anyway, turning the deadbolt and testing the handle. The back door, which opened onto a small porch overlooking the fields, had been unlocked. I turned its deadbolt and checked it twice. The basement door was at the end of a short hallway off the kitchen. It was painted white. It was locked, and a heavy chain with a padlock hung across it on the exterior. I checked the padlock. It was secure. The door to the old dairy house would require me to go outside. I looked at the remaining light, perhaps 10 minutes. I walked quickly out the back door, leaving it unlocked behind me, and crossed the yard toward the small structure my grandfather's map had labeled as the dairy house. It was perhaps 80 yards away, as the document had stated. A squat building made of stone, with a wooden door painted the same green as the house's shutters. The padlock on the exterior was rusted but functional. I tested it. It held. The building had no windows that I could see. I walked back to the house. The sun was nearly gone now, just a sliver of orange above the flat horizon. I entered through the back door, locked it, and checked it twice. The rules said sundown. I did not know exactly when sundown was, but it was close. I stood in the kitchen and watched the last light fade from the sky. At 7:41 p.m., the sun was completely gone. The fields turned gray. then purple, then black. The first stars appeared. I realized I was holding my breath. Nothing happened. The house settled around me, making the small sounds that old houses make, creaks and pops as the wood cooled from the day's heat. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, somewhere distant, a coyote called and was answered by another. I let out my breath. I felt foolish. My grandfather had been old, alone, possibly experiencing the early stages of dementia that his attorney had been too polite to mention. The rules were the product of an aging mind, finding patterns in randomness. I would stay here because I had no other options. I would learn to farm or sell the property. I would not spend my nights hiding from imaginary threats. I made myself a sandwich from the supplies I'd brought: bread, peanut butter, a bruised apple from a gas station in Emporia, and ate it at the kitchen table while the darkness outside the windows grew complete. The house had no television. The radio in the study was the old kind with a dial, and I decided to leave it alone for tonight. I found bed sheets in a closet on the second floor and made up the bed in the room that had probably been my grandfather's. The mattress was old, but firm. The window faced west, toward the fields that were now invisible in the darkness. I drew the curtains before undressing. I fell asleep at approximately 9:30 p.m. I woke at 11:43 p.m. to the sound of footsteps. They were circling the house, slow, deliberate, crunching on the gravel that surrounded the foundation. One footstep every 2 seconds or so. Not hurried, not hesitant, just steady, like someone walking a familiar path. I lay in the darkness and listened. The footsteps moved from the front of the house toward the east side. They paused at what I estimated was the corner of the building. Then they continued, rounding the corner, proceeding along the east wall toward the back. Rule 8 had said once per month, on the night of the new moon. I had not checked the lunar calendar before arriving. I did not know what phase the moon was in. The footsteps continued around the back of the house. I heard them pass beneath my window. I was on the second floor, but the sound carried clearly in the silence. They did not pause. They did not speed up. They simply continued, rounding the southwest corner, proceeding along the south side of the house toward the front. Rule 8 had said, do not attempt to count the footsteps. I was counting them automatically, a habit of a mind that needed to process information. I made myself stop. The footsteps completed what seemed to be a full circuit and began again from the front of the house. East side, back, west side, south side, front, again. I lay in the bed with the covers pulled up to my chin and listened. I did not look out the window. I did not try to identify the source of the sound. I did not call out or make any noise. At approximately 3:20 in the morning, by my watch's faintly glowing hands, the footsteps stopped. I waited another 10 minutes. The silence outside was complete. No coyotes, no wind, no creaking from the house. Just nothing. I did not sleep again that night. At 5:47 a.m., according to my watch, the first gray light appeared at the edge of the curtains. I rose and looked outside. The wheat fields were emerging from the darkness, gold and peaceful in the early morning. A meadowlark called from somewhere in the grass. The sky turned pink, then orange, then pale blue. I checked every door in the house. All of them remained locked. Outside, I walked the perimeter of the building, looking at the gravel that surrounded the foundation. There were no footprints visible, no marks in the stones, no indication that anyone had walked there. But the gravel itself had been disturbed. The pattern of the small rocks was different than I remembered from the day before. Not in any dramatic way, but subtly. as if they had been shifted by something passing over them repeatedly throughout the night. I stood there for a long time, looking at the gravel, thinking about my grandfather's rules. The first week passed slowly. I established routines because routines were necessary, and because the rules demanded them. Each morning, I woke at sunrise and checked the doors. All of them in sequence: front, back, basement, cellar. The cellar door was indeed painted red, and the basement door was indeed painted white. I verified this each morning for the first 4 days until I was satisfied that the colors had not changed. I refilled the water jugs from the well, drawing water before 8 a.m. to be safe. The well was a stone structure covered by a wooden cap, located exactly 32 yards from the back porch. As my grandfather had written, the water was cold and clear and tasted faintly of iron. I explored the property during daylight hours only. 160 acres was more land than I'd expected. The wheat fields covered perhaps 80 acres, most of it fallow and overgrown from my grandfather's illness and death. The rest was mixed pasture and a small woodlot at the southern boundary. The tree line my grandfather had mentioned at the northern boundary was exactly where he'd said it would be. A thick stand of cottonwoods and scrub oak that marked the border with the neighboring property. I measured the distance from the barn to the tree line. 138 yards, close enough to my grandfather's estimate. I did not approach within 40 yards of the trees. The barn was large, red painted, in need of repair, but structurally sound. I found the door in the northwest corner on my second day. It was small, perhaps 4 feet high, set into the wall as if it had been added after the original construction. It was locked with a padlock, similar to the one on the dairy house. I did not try to open it. I did not look through the gap beneath it. The old dairy house was exactly as the rules had described. I entered it once during my first week, at approximately 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, to see what was inside. The interior was cool and damp, built into a small hillside that kept it naturally refrigerated. Shelves on the north wall held empty jars, some rusted tools, a coil of rope, and 3 plastic jugs of water that had been there for some time, judging by the dust on their handles. The drain in the floor was in the center of the room. It was perhaps 8 inches in diameter, covered with a rusted metal grate. I did not approach it. I did not speak while inside. I left the dairy house and locked it behind me, and did not return for the rest of the week. The radio in the study was an old Zenith with a dial that covered frequencies from 530 to 1,700 kilohertz. The 4 channels my grandfather had mentioned were marked on a piece of tape affixed to the front panel. Channel 1, the sheriff, was at 1240. Channel 2, the fire department, was at 890. Channel 3, the agricultural extension, was at 1440. Channel 4 was at 1630, near the top of the dial. I tested the first 3 channels during daylight hours. The sheriff's dispatcher answered on Channel 1 with a bored voice and confirmed that Earl Carver had indeed passed away in March. The fire department on Channel 2 did not answer, but I heard another call come through. A farmer reporting a controlled burn on property south of town. The agricultural extension on Channel 3 broadcast a recorded message about wheat prices and an upcoming 4-H event. I did not tune to Channel 4. At night, I followed the rules. I locked the doors by sundown. I did not answer them if anyone knocked, though no one knocked during that first week. I avoided the upstairs hallway between 2:15 and 2:50 in the morning, sleeping through most of it, or lying in my room with the door closed. I did not draw water from the well after dark. I kept the curtains closed. On my 5th night, I heard a child crying. It was approximately 1:20 in the morning. I was lying awake, as I often was now, listening to the silence of the house and the land around it. The sound came from somewhere to the east, toward the old dairy house, a high, thin wail, like an infant in distress. Rule 12. There are no children on this property. There are no children within 3 miles of this property. The sound is not a child. Do not investigate. I pulled the blanket over my head like I was 8 years old again, afraid of the dark. The crying continued for approximately 6 minutes. Then it stopped. I did not investigate. On the morning of my 7th day, I found an envelope in the mailbox at the end of the driveway. It had no postage, no return address. My name was written on the front in handwriting I did not recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed this time rather than handwritten. Mr. Carver, your grandfather was a careful man and a good neighbor. We hope you will be the same. He may not have had time to tell you about the supplementary protocols. These become necessary after the first incident, which by our estimation occurred on your 1st night. The footsteps arrive when someone new takes residence. They will not return monthly unless you remain through the first lunar cycle, which ends in 18 days. The following amendments should be added to your grandfather's list. 15. If you observe lights in the windows of the old dairy house after sunset, do not approach and do not look directly at the lights for more than 2 seconds. Return to the main house immediately and verify that all doors remain locked. 16. The telephone may ring between midnight and 4 in the morning. You may answer it, but do not speak first. Wait for the caller to identify themselves. If no identification is given within 10 seconds, hang up. Do not call back. 17. Once every 7 to 10 days, you may notice that the distance between the house and the barn has changed. Do not attempt to measure this change. Accept it. The distances provided in your grandfather's original rules remain accurate for safety purposes, regardless of apparent changes. 18. If you hear your grandfather's voice at any time from any source, do not respond. Your grandfather is dead. Any voice claiming to be him is not. 19. The grain bin north of the machine shed contains nothing of value. Do not enter it. The door does not lock from the inside. 20. During thunderstorms, you may observe figures standing in the fields. These are not people seeking shelter. Do not offer assistance. Remain indoors until the storm passes, and for 30 minutes afterward. These amendments have served your grandfather well for the past 11 years. We trust they will serve you also. Do not attempt to identify the author of this letter. We are neighbors, nothing more. We share certain responsibilities and observations. Your grandfather understood this. We hope you will as well. The mailbox is checked on Wednesdays. If you have questions, leave them there. I read the letter twice. I looked at the mailbox, at the road stretching away in both directions, at the flat and empty landscape that surrounded me on all sides. I saw no one. I heard no cars. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket and walked back to the house. The second week was when I began to test the boundaries. Not deliberately, not with any intention of breaking the rules, but the human mind is not built for compliance without understanding, and I was beginning to feel the weight of my confinement. During daylight hours, I explored further. I walked the fence lines. I examined the machine shed, which contained a tractor that had not run in years, and various implements whose purposes I could only guess at. I looked at the grain bin from the outside, but did not open its door. I found in the study a box of journals that my grandfather had kept. They dated back 12 years to the summer after my grandmother had died. The entries were sparse: weather observations, crop notes, equipment repairs. But occasionally there were other notations. June 14th, third night of the crying. Did not investigate. Sound ceased at 2:07 a.m. August 3rd. The barn door was open this morning. I did not open it. Secured it with additional chain. October 19th. Saw R. Whitfield at the hardware store. He asked if I'd had any trouble lately. I told him no. He said he was glad to hear it. Neither of us mentioned what trouble might mean. December 2nd. First snowfall. Tracks in the snow around the house this morning. Human-shaped, but too large. Did not measure. Shoveled them away before looking too closely. February 7th. The child was crying again tonight. It called my name this time. I did not answer. The rules say, do not answer. I did not answer. I read the journals in the afternoons, sitting in the study with the curtains open, letting the daylight pour in while I absorbed my grandfather's careful observations. He never explained what he was observing. He never theorized. He simply recorded what happened and what he did in response. By the end of the second week, I had read 2 years of entries. I had learned that the footsteps came approximately once every 28 days, which corresponded to the lunar cycle. I had learned that the crying occurred irregularly, sometimes twice a week, sometimes not for months. I had learned that my grandfather had seen figures in the fields at least a dozen times, but had never described them beyond the word figures. I had also learned that in the spring of 3 years ago, someone named Martin Holloway had stayed at the farm for one night and had not followed the rules. March 23rd. M. Holloway arrived this afternoon, relative of Dorothy from church, passing through on his way to Colorado. I warned him about the doors. He laughed, said he'd grown up on a farm and knew better than to worry about ghost stories. I told him they weren't ghost stories. He laughed again. March 24th. M. Holloway left sometime in the night. The back door was open when I woke. No sign of him. No sign of his car. Called Dorothy. She said she'd never heard of anyone named Martin Holloway. I did not argue with her. I locked the back door and have not opened it after dark since. I put the journal down and looked out the window at the fields. The wheat moved in the wind like water, gold waves rippling toward the horizon. It was peaceful. It was beautiful. It was the kind of landscape that should have contained nothing more threatening than the weather. That night, at approximately 11:15 p.m., someone knocked on the front door. I was in the study, reading another of my grandfather's journals by lamplight. The knock was firm, 3 sharp raps, like a visitor with confidence. I did not move. I did not speak. I did not answer the door. "Hello?" a voice called. Male, middle-aged, friendly. "Mr. Carver, your grandfather said I could stop by anytime. I'm Bill from the next property over. Just wanted to check on you." I sat very still. "I saw your lights on," the voice continued. "Figured I'd introduce myself. Your grandfather and I used to play cards on Saturdays." The voice was reasonable. The request was reasonable. Everything about the situation was reasonable, except that it was after sundown, and the rules said, do not answer the door for any reason. I waited. "Mr. Carver, you there?" Another pause, then the sound of footsteps on the porch, retreating, then nothing. I waited another hour before I moved. I checked the front door. It was still locked. I checked the back door. still locked. I checked the basement door and the cellar door. Both locked, their colors unchanged. In the morning, I walked out to the porch and looked at the ground where my visitor would have stood. There were no footprints, no tire tracks on the driveway, no indication that anyone had been there at all. I added a note to my own journal, which I had started keeping in imitation of my grandfather. Day 13, someone knocked on the door at 11:15 p.m., claimed to be a neighbor named Bill. Did not answer. No evidence of visitor in the morning. On the 15th day, I found another envelope in the mailbox. Mr. Carver, you are doing well. We observed the visitor on Tuesday night. You did not answer. This was correct. Bill does not exist. Your grandfather had no neighbors on the adjacent property. The nearest occupied residence is 4.2 miles south, owned by the Erickson family, who have lived there for 31 years, without incident because they follow their own rules. We offer the following additional amendments, as your tenure has now exceeded 2 weeks and certain patterns may begin to emerge. 21. If you wake in the night and find that you are not in the room where you fell asleep, do not panic. Remain still. Close your eyes. Count to 60. When you open your eyes, you will be back where you belong. Do not attempt to determine how you moved. 22. The bathroom mirror on the second floor may occasionally show a room behind you that does not match the actual room. Do not turn around to verify. Simply leave the bathroom and do not use that mirror again until the following morning. 23. Certain mornings, you may find small objects have been moved within the house. Keys, books, utensils. Do not search for their original locations, accept their new positions, and continue. 24. If you receive mail addressed to your grandfather after this date, burn it without opening. Do not read the contents. These amendments address common occurrences that many residents experience. They are not causes for alarm, provided the protocols are followed. We also advise the new moon is in 3 days. The footsteps will return. Your first experience with them was abbreviated due to your status as a new arrival. The second occurrence will be complete. Prepare accordingly. I read the letter twice, as I always did. I looked at the final paragraph. 3 days. The new moon. I had survived the footsteps once by ignorance, by lying in bed and listening without knowing exactly what I was hearing. This time, I would know they were coming. This time, I would have to endure them deliberately. I spent the next 3 days preparing. I inventoried the house. I had 15 cans of food in the pantry. Beans, corn, soup, tomatoes. I had 3 loaves of bread, one of which was growing stale. I had peanut butter and jelly and a jar of pickles. I had 18 jugs of water, 6 in the kitchen, and 12 more in the cellar. I had batteries for the flashlight, but no spare bulbs. I had candles and matches. I had the radio, which I had not tuned to Channel 4 and did not intend to. I walked the perimeter of the house during daylight, noting every window and door. Front door, solid oak, 2 inches thick, deadbolt functional. Back door, same. Windows, 12 on the first floor, 8 on the second, all with locks, all with curtains. The basement door was chained from the outside. The cellar door was padlocked. The old dairy house was 80 yards away. The barn was 53 yards north. The well was 32 yards west. The tree line was 138 yards from the barn, which meant it was approximately 190 yards from the house. These distances mattered. My grandfather had measured them. The letters had confirmed them. If something went wrong, I needed to know how far I could run and in what direction. On the night of the new moon, I ate dinner early. Beans and bread, water from one of the jugs. I washed the dishes and put them away. I checked every door in the house, twice each. I drew the curtains on every window. At 9 p.m., I went to the study and turned on the lamp. I had chosen the study because my grandfather's rules said it was the safest room in the house. Double-thick walls, window facing south, curtains drawn. I had my watch. I had a notebook and pencil. I had a flashlight in case the power went out. I had nothing else that seemed useful. I waited. At 11:38 p.m., the footsteps began. They started at the front of the house as before. Slow, deliberate crunching on the gravel. One step every 2 seconds. But this time, there were more of them. The first set circled the house from front to back, as they had on my first night. But by the time they reached the rear of the building, a second set had begun at the front, and then a third, and then more, until I lost count. The sounds overlapped, creating a rhythm that was almost musical. Step, 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 step. A dozen sets of footsteps, maybe more, all circling the house at the same pace, but starting at different times, so that the sound was continuous. A constant pressure of movement around me on all sides. I sat in the study with my hands flat on the desk and listened. I did not count. I did not try to track directions. I simply listened and breathed and waited for it to end. At some point, my watch said 1:23 a.m. The footsteps paused, all of them simultaneously, as if whatever was making them had received a signal. The silence was so sudden that it felt louder than the noise had been. Then a voice spoke. "Thomas." It came from outside the study window. A man's voice. Old, tired, familiar. "Thomas, it's your grandfather. I know you can hear me." My hands trembled. I pressed them harder against the desk. "I made a mistake," the voice said. "I wrote those rules wrong. You don't have to follow them. They're keeping you prisoner. Open the door, Thomas. Come outside. Let me explain. Rule 18. If you hear your grandfather's voice at any time, from any source, do not respond. Your grandfather is dead. Any voice claiming to be him is not." I did not respond. "Thomas, please, I've been waiting so long. Just open the door. Just for a moment." The voice was exactly right. The cadence, the slight rasp, the way he said my name with emphasis on the first syllable. If I closed my eyes, I could almost see him standing on the other side of the curtain, an old man in work clothes, his hands rough from decades of farming, his eyes kind and tired. "Thomas." I covered my ears with my hands. The voice continued, muffled but still audible. "Thomas, don't be afraid. I'm not one of them. I'm your grandfather. I love you. Please open the door." I pressed my hands harder against my ears. I hummed tunelessly, trying to drown out the sound. The voice continued, patient and kind, and completely wrong. At 3:17 a.m., the voice stopped mid-sentence. At 3:18 a.m., the footsteps resumed. They circled the house for another 7 minutes, then stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. I remained in the study until sunrise. At 5:51 a.m., when the first light crept under the curtains, I opened the study door and walked through the house to the front window. I pulled back the curtain and looked outside. The gravel around the house had been churned as if by a crowd. Hundreds of impressions, overlapping and dense, covering every inch of the perimeter. But the impressions were wrong. They were shaped like footprints, but too long, too narrow, with too many toes. I counted the toes in one particularly clear impression. 7. I let the curtain fall and went to make breakfast. The letter that arrived 3 days later contained no new amendments. Instead, it contained a name. Mr. Carver, you survived the new moon. We observed your lights in the study. You did well. We must now tell you something your grandfather did not include in his rules, because he did not wish to alarm you before you had demonstrated the capacity to be alarmed appropriately. There was a resident of this property before your grandfather. Her name was Agnes Whitmore. She purchased the farm in 1952 and lived alone until 1961. In September of that year, she ceased responding to communications. When concerned neighbors investigated, they found the house empty. The doors were unlocked. The stove was still warm. Agnes was never found. Your grandfather purchased the property in 1962 from Agnes's estate. He found her journals in the attic. He did not tell us what they contained. He burned them and began writing his own rules, based on what he observed and what he was told by others who had lived in this region longer than he had. The rules work. 62 years of survival prove this. But the rules are not complete. They cannot be complete. The nature of what exists here does not permit complete understanding. Your grandfather asked us to tell you when you were ready. The rules will change. What works today may not work tomorrow. You must be observant. You must be flexible. You must be willing to add amendments of your own. You must also understand that eventually, the rules may fail. We do not say this to frighten you. We say it because honesty is necessary. Agnes did not understand this. Your grandfather did. He survived for 62 years by paying attention and adapting. We hope you will do the same. I read the letter 4 times. I folded it and put it with the others in a box I'd started keeping in the study. That night, I began keeping more detailed records. I noted the time of every sound I heard. I noted the position of objects in the house when I went to bed and when I woke. I noted the distances between buildings, checking them each morning with a length of rope I'd marked off in 10-yard intervals. On the 21st day, the distance from the house to the barn had shortened by 6 feet. On the 22nd day, it had returned to normal. On the 24th day, I woke in the hallway outside my bedroom at 3:14 a.m. I closed my eyes, counted to 60, and opened them. I was back in bed. On the 26th day, the bathroom mirror showed a room behind me that contained someone sitting in a chair by the window. I did not turn around. I left the bathroom and did not use that mirror until the following morning. On the 28th day, I received mail addressed to my grandfather. It was a postcard from a resort in Florida, signed, "Your Friends at the Happy Palm." The handwriting was perfect. The postmark was 2 weeks old. I burned it in the fireplace without reading beyond the signature. On the 30th day, I wrote my first amendment, 25. If you observe that the cellar door and the basement door have exchanged positions, if the red door is where the white door should be, and vice versa, do not enter either door for the remainder of that day. The doors will return to their correct positions by the following sunrise. I had observed this on my 29th night. The doors had not changed color. They had physically moved, the red door now at the end of the hall and the white door on the east side of the house. I had tested the locks on both. They were functional. I had not entered either one. In the morning, the doors were back where they belonged. I added my amendment to the list and continued. The first major storm came on my 42nd night. I had been monitoring the weather on Channel 3, which broadcast agricultural forecasts every 6 hours. The system was coming from the southwest, the announcer said. with potential for severe thunderstorms and possible tornadoes. Residents were advised to take precautions. I did. I filled extra water jugs. I brought additional candles to the study. I tested the flashlight and found the batteries were low, so I replaced them with the spares I'd bought on my last supply run to the nearest town, 12 miles south. I checked every door in the house twice. At 8:47 p.m., the first lightning appeared on the horizon. At 9:15 p.m., the wind began. By 10 p.m., the storm was directly overhead. Rain hammered against the windows. Thunder shook the house. The power went out at 10:23 p.m., plunging everything into darkness. I lit candles in the study and waited. At 11:02 p.m., I heard something that was not thunder. It was a tapping at the window. Rhythmic, deliberate, completely distinct from the random percussion of the rain. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. I did not approach the window. I did not open the curtains. Amendment 20 said that during thunderstorms, figures might appear in the fields and should not be approached. It said nothing about figures that might approach the house. The tapping continued for 6 minutes, then stopped. At 11:31 p.m., I heard my name. Thomas. It was not my grandfather's voice this time. It was a woman's voice. Young, friendly, unfamiliar. Thomas, please, I'm lost in the storm. I need shelter. Rule 2. If someone claims to need help, do not respond. I did not respond. Thomas, I can see your candles. I know you're in there. Please, I'm so cold. The voice was pitiful. The voice was convincing. The voice was exactly the kind of voice that would make a person open a door without thinking. I sat in the study and listened to the storm and the voice and the occasional tapping and did not move. At 12:07 a.m., the power came back on. The voice stopped mid-sentence. The tapping stopped. For a moment, there was only the sound of the rain already beginning to diminish. At 12:34 a.m., the storm passed. At 12:41 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway outside the study. I froze. The footsteps were inside the house. They were slow, deliberate, moving from the direction of the kitchen toward the study door. All the doors were locked. I had checked them twice. Nothing should be inside the house. The footsteps stopped outside the study door. I looked at the door. It was closed, but not locked. I had not locked it because I had not expected anything to be inside the house with me. The doorknob began to turn. I moved faster than I had ever moved in my life. I crossed the room in 3 steps, grabbed the doorknob from my side, and held it still. The pressure on the other side was enormous. Whatever was trying to turn the handle was strong, far stronger than I was. I braced my feet against the floor and held on. For approximately 45 seconds, we struggled in silence. The doorknob trembled in my grip. My arms burned. My shoulders ached. The pressure was relentless, inhuman, impossible. Then it stopped. The footsteps retreated down the hallway toward the kitchen. I heard the back door open. I heard it close. I remained pressed against the study door for another hour, my hands cramped around the doorknob, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. At 2:15 a.m., I remembered the rule about the upstairs hallway. I was not in the upstairs hallway. I was in the study on the first floor. The rule did not apply. At 2:50 a.m., I released the doorknob and collapsed into the chair behind the desk. In the morning, I checked the back door. It was locked, as it had been when I checked it before the storm. The deadbolt was engaged. The chain was intact. But on the floor, just inside the threshold, there was a single wet footprint. It had 7 toes. The letter that arrived the following Wednesday contained emergency protocols. Mr. Carver, we observed the storm. We observed what came during it. You survived by holding the study door. This was correct, but improvised. Your grandfather would want you to have more structured guidance for similar situations. The following emergency protocols are to be used during severe weather events, power outages, or any circumstance in which normal rules become difficult to follow. Emergency protocol. If the power fails during nighttime hours, light no more than 3 candles. Place them in the study. Do not carry them through the house. Remain in the study until power returns or until sunrise, whichever comes first. Emergency protocol. If you hear footsteps inside the house, do not investigate. Proceed immediately to the study and lock the door from the inside. The study door has a deadbolt on the interior that your grandfather installed 11 years ago. Use it. Emergency protocol. C. If something attempts to enter the study through the door, do not engage physically. Instead, speak the following words aloud. This room is occupied. I acknowledge your presence. Please withdraw. Repeat 3 times. If the presence does not withdraw, continue repeating until sunrise. Emergency protocol. D. If something attempts to enter the study through the window, close your eyes and count to 120. Do not open them until you have completed the count. The window will remain intact. Emergency protocol. E. If all other protocols fail, lie flat on the floor of the study with your hands at your sides and your eyes closed. Breathe slowly. Do not move until sunrise. This protocol has never been tested to our knowledge. We hope it never needs to be. I read the protocols 3 times. I found the deadbolt on the study door that I had not noticed before. It was small, brass, easy to miss unless you were looking for it. I tested it. It worked. I added the protocols to my growing file of rules and amendments. That night, I dreamed of Agnes Whitmore. In the dream, she was standing in the kitchen of the farmhouse, wearing a dress from the 1950s. Her hair pinned back, her face kind and tired. She looked at me with an expression I could not interpret. The rules are not enough, she said. They were never enough. What else is there? I asked. She smiled sadly. Luck, attention, the willingness to run. Run where? She did not answer. She walked to the back door, opened it, and stepped outside into darkness. I woke at 4:17 a.m. The house was silent. The dream was already fading. I lay in bed until sunrise, thinking about luck and attention and the willingness to run. By my 60th day on the farm, I had developed a comprehensive routine. I woke at sunrise. I checked every door. I verified the colors of the basement and cellar doors. I refilled the water jugs. I ate breakfast. I spent the morning hours on farm maintenance. There was always something to fix, something to clean, something to inventory. In the afternoons, I read my grandfather's journals and the letters from my anonymous neighbors. I added amendments when I observed new patterns. I reviewed the emergency protocols until I had memorized them. At sundown, I checked every door again. I drew every curtain. I retreated to the study with candles and a flashlight, and the radio tuned to channel 1, where I could hear the sheriff's dispatcher if I needed reassurance that the outside world still existed. I followed the rules, all of them, every night, and most nights nothing happened. The footsteps came once more during a new moon, circling the house for almost 4 hours. I sat in the study and listened and did not count them and did not look outside. The voice that claimed to be my grandfather returned twice. I did not answer. I covered my ears and hummed until it stopped. The child cried 3 times over a period of 2 weeks. I did not investigate. Twice, I woke somewhere other than my bed. once in the upstairs hallway at 2:23 a.m., which was a violation of Rule 3 that I had not committed deliberately. I closed my eyes, counted to 60, and woke in my bed with no memory of how I had returned. Once, I found the bathroom mirror showing a different room behind me. I left without looking. 3 times, small objects moved overnight. A cup from the sink to the table, a book from the study to the kitchen, a knife from the drawer to the counter. I did not search for explanations. I accepted the new positions and continued. The rules worked. They kept me alive. But the rules were not complete. They could not be complete. And on my 73rd night, I learned how incomplete they truly were. It began at 9:47 p.m., less than an hour after sundown. I was in the study, reviewing my notes, when I heard a vehicle on the driveway. An engine, tires on gravel, headlights sweeping through the gap in the curtains. No one had visited the farm since my arrival. No one except whatever knocked on doors and called my name. I did not move. I did not approach the window. I waited. The engine stopped. A car door opened and closed. Footsteps on the gravel. Normal footsteps, at a normal pace, approaching the front door. A knock. 3 sharp raps, firm and confident. I did not answer. "Hello?" a voice called. Female, middle-aged, with a flat Kansas accent. "Mr. Carver, I'm Deputy Barbara Wilkins from the county sheriff's office. Your neighbors called in a welfare check. Are you all right in there?" I moved to the front window and parted the curtain just enough to see. There was indeed a car in the driveway, a brown county sheriff's cruiser with a star on the door. A woman in a tan uniform was standing on the front porch, her hand near her belt, her posture professional, but concerned. She looked real. She looked completely, utterly real. But it was after sundown. The rules said do not answer the door for any reason. "Mr. Carver, I can see movement in there. I know you're home. Please open the door. I just need to verify that you're safe." I stood at the window, paralyzed. The woman was real. The car was real. The uniform was real. If I did not answer, she might call for backup. She might break down the door. She might create exactly the kind of situation that would put me in danger from everything else that existed out here. But if she was not real, if she was something pretending to be real, then opening the door would put me in danger anyway. "Mr. Carver, I'm going to have to insist. Please open the door or give me some indication that you're all right." I made a decision. "I'm fine," I called through the door. "I apologize for concerning anyone. I'm just not feeling well tonight. Can you come back tomorrow?" A pause, then. "I'd really prefer to verify your condition in person, sir. Department policy." "I understand, but I'm not comfortable opening the door after dark. If you come back at sunrise, I'll be happy to speak with you then." Another pause, longer this time. "All right, Mr. Carver. I'll note your response in my report. Someone will be back in the morning to follow up. You take care of yourself." "Thank you, Deputy." I heard her footsteps retreat across the porch. The car door opened and closed. The engine started. The headlights swept across the curtains again as she backed down the driveway. I watched until the taillights disappeared. Then I returned to the study and sat in the chair behind the desk and waited. At 11:34 p.m., the phone rang. I let it ring 3 times, then answered. I did not speak first, as the amendment instructed. "Thomas Carver!" A woman's voice, the same flat Kansas accent. "Who is this?" "This is Deputy Wilkins. I was at your property earlier this evening. I wanted to let you know that I'll be returning at first light to complete the welfare check." I said nothing. "Mr. Carver, are you still there?" "I'm here." Good. I also wanted to tell you something off the record if you're willing to listen. I waited. Your grandfather was a good man. He helped a lot of people in this county over the years, but he was also careful. Very careful. Do you understand what I mean? I think so. Good. I'm glad you didn't open the door tonight. That was the right choice. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Deputy Wilkins. Yes? When you came to the door earlier, was that really you? A long pause. Then, I never came to your door tonight, Mr. Carver. I've been at the station since 6 p.m. I only heard about the welfare check 20 minutes ago when dispatch forwarded your neighbor's call. I looked at the front window where the curtains were still parted from when I'd looked out at the car. Then who? I don't know, she said. But I'm glad you didn't open the door. I'll see you at sunrise. Don't answer any more visitors tonight. The line went dead. I stood in the kitchen with the phone in my hand, staring at nothing. Then I walked to the front window and closed the curtain completely. Outside, somewhere on the driveway, I heard a car engine start. The real Deputy Wilkins arrived at 6:17 a.m., 26 minutes after sunrise. She drove the same brown cruiser I had seen the night before. She wore the same tan uniform. She had the same flat Kansas accent. But she was different in small ways that mattered. Her boots were dustier. Her badge was pinned slightly lower. Her hair was grayer at the temples. I opened the door for her because it was daylight and because I needed to know. Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Carver. I'm sorry for the confusion last night. What confusion exactly? She looked at me carefully. Your neighbors called in a welfare check around 7 p.m. Dispatch tried to reach you by phone, but there was no answer. I was assigned to follow up, but I was handling another call until after 10. By the time I got to the phone to call you, someone had already visited your property. Someone in a sheriff's cruiser, I said. Someone wearing your uniform, someone who knew my name. Yes. She did not seem surprised. Does this happen often? Not often, but it happens. She paused. Your grandfather told me about it once. He said it started about 15 years ago. Someone would come to the door, a neighbor, a delivery driver, a county official. Everything would seem normal, but the timing would be wrong, or the details would be off, or they'd ask to be invited inside. And if they were invited inside, she did not answer. Deputy Wilkins, if they were invited inside, what happened? We don't know for certain, but your grandfather believed it was very, very important not to find out. We stood on the porch in the early morning light. The wheat fields stretched away in every direction, golden and peaceful. A hawk circled overhead, hunting for mice. Your grandfather's been gone 2 months, Deputy Wilkins said. You're the first family member to take up residence here since. Is that significant? Everything out here is significant. The land remembers. The things that live here remember. When someone new arrives, there's a period of attention, testing, curiosity maybe. She shook her head. I don't understand it any better than your grandfather did. But I know that if you follow the rules, you can survive. And if you don't, I know, I said. I've been following the rules. Good. She started to turn away, then stopped. One more thing, Mr. Carver. The welfare check was called in by your neighbors. They said they were concerned about you. Which neighbors? That's the thing. When I tried to follow up, no one in a 4-mile radius admitted to making the call. The number on the dispatch log doesn't exist. I thought about the letters in my mailbox, the amendments, the protocols. Maybe they prefer to remain anonymous, I said. Maybe. She did not sound convinced. Or maybe the call wasn't made by anyone real. She walked to her car. I watched her drive away down the long gravel driveway until she was out of sight. Then I went back inside and locked the door. That night, I wrote the most important amendment of all. 26. Trust nothing absolutely. Verify everything possible. Assume that any visitor after sundown, regardless of apparent authority or familiarity, is something other than what it claims to be. Assume that any communication received after sundown, regardless of apparent source, may be compromised. Assume that the rules themselves may be manipulated, altered, or falsified. The only things you can trust are your own observations, made in full daylight, recorded in your own handwriting. Even those may fail eventually, but they are all you have. I put down my pen and looked at the growing stack of rules and amendments. 26 numbered items now, plus 5 emergency protocols. A framework for survival that my grandfather had begun and I had continued. A map of dangers that could not be fully mapped, of threats that could not be fully understood. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was all I had. On my 90th day, I lost track of time for the first time. I woke to find that it was not morning. The clock said 2:14 a.m. The room was dark. I was not in my bed. I was standing at the window of my bedroom, one hand on the curtain, about to pull it open. I stopped. Outside, through the gap in the fabric, I could see something standing in the field. A figure, human-shaped but too tall, its proportions slightly wrong. It was facing the house. It was facing my window. I let go of the curtain and stepped back. My heart was pounding. My hand was shaking. I did not remember getting out of bed. I did not remember walking to the window. I did not remember reaching for the curtain. The figure in the field did not move. I backed away slowly until I reached the door of my room. I opened it and stepped into the hallway. The hallway was dark. The time was 2:14 a.m. Rule 3. The lights in the upstairs hallway must remain off between 2:15 and 2:50 a.m. Do not enter the upstairs hallway during this window. I checked my watch again. 2:14 a.m. I had 1 minute. I ran. I reached the stairs and descended them 3 at a time. I hit the first floor at 2:14:47. I ran to the study and slammed the door and threw the deadbolt and collapsed against the wall, gasping. At 2:15 a.m. exactly, I heard something walk down the upstairs hallway. Slow, deliberate footsteps. They moved from the far end of the hall toward the stairs. They paused at the top of the staircase. Then they descended, one step at a time, patient, unhurried. I pressed myself against the wall of the study and listened as the footsteps reached the first floor. They moved through the front hall. They moved past the kitchen. They stopped outside the study door. I held my breath. The doorknob did not turn this time. Instead, something pressed against the door from the other side. A weight distributed evenly, as if something was leaning against the wood. Thomas, my grandfather's voice, or what claimed to be my grandfather's voice. Thomas, I know you can hear me. I pressed my hands over my ears. I hummed tunelessly. I closed my eyes and counted to 60. When I opened them, the pressure on the door was gone. The footsteps had retreated. The house was silent. I remained in the study until sunrise. In the morning, I checked my watch. It showed 6:03 a.m. I checked the clock in the kitchen. It showed 8:47 a.m. I checked the clock in the study. It showed 2:14 a.m. I unplugged it and put it in the cellar and never set foot in the study during nighttime hours again. The summer faded into autumn. The wheat fields were harvested by a contract crew that came during daylight hours, worked quickly, and left before sundown. They did not speak to me beyond what was necessary. They did not ask questions. They had worked for my grandfather for 12 years, they said, and they understood how things worked out here. I paid them from the farm account and watched them drive away. The nights grew longer as the days shortened. Sundown came earlier and earlier. By October, it was dark by 7:30. By November, by 5:15. More hours of darkness meant more hours of danger. I adapted. I ate dinner earlier. I completed my outdoor tasks by mid-afternoon. I retreated to the first floor before sundown and did not climb the stairs again until morning. The footsteps came during every new moon now. They circled the house for 4 hours each time, always stopping at exactly 3:17 a.m. The voice that claimed to be my grandfather spoke to me 3 or 4 times per week, always from just outside the study window, always saying things designed to make me open the door. I did not open the door. I covered my ears and hummed and waited for sunrise. The child cried almost every night in October. The sound was getting closer. On the 12th of October, it was somewhere in the yard. On the 19th, it was on the porch. On the 26th, it was at the back door, and I could hear small fists pounding on the wood and a high, thin voice saying, "Please, please, please." I did not open the door. On November 3rd, I received a final letter. "Mr. Carver, you have survived for 130 days. This is longer than we expected. Your grandfather would be proud. We must now tell you something that we have withheld until we were certain you could handle it. The rules are failing. Not because they are wrong, because the nature of what exists here is changing, adapting, learning. Your grandfather noticed this in his final years." The footsteps began circling closer to the house. The voice began using information it should not have known. The child began crying from positions inside the property boundary. The rules worked because they were based on patterns that had held for decades. But the patterns are shifting. What was safe yesterday may not be safe tomorrow. We do not know why this is happening. We do not know how to stop it. We can only tell you what your grandfather told us before he died. The rules are necessary, but they are not sufficient. Eventually, you may need to leave. Eventually, staying may become impossible. If that day comes, you will know it. The signs will be unmistakable. When you see them, do not hesitate. Take what you can carry. Do not look back. Do not return. The farm has claimed everyone who waited too long. We hope you will not become another. I read the letter once. I did not read it again. I folded it and placed it with the others and continued following the rules. On November 15th, I saw the unmistakable sign. It was approximately 6:40 p.m., just after sundown. I was in the kitchen, preparing a simple dinner, when I noticed movement through the window. The old dairy house was glowing. Not lit, glowing. A pale luminescence that seemed to come from the stones themselves, as if the building had absorbed daylight and was slowly releasing it. I watched for exactly 3 seconds as the rules instructed. Then I looked away. But in those 3 seconds, I saw something else. The door of the dairy house was open. I had locked it that morning, as I did every morning. I had checked the padlock twice. I had not approached it since. The door was open, and inside, something was moving. I went to the study. I locked the deadbolt. I sat in the chair behind the desk and waited. At 8:23 p.m., the lights in the house began to flicker. At 8:41 p.m., the power went out completely. I lit my 3 candles as the emergency protocol instructed. I placed them on the desk. I sat in the small circle of their light and listened. The footsteps began at 8:57 p.m., not circling the house, approaching it. They came from the direction of the dairy house, southeast, across the yard, through the grass that I could hear rustling despite the absence of wind. They stopped at the back door. There was no knock. There was no voice. There was only silence, and then the sound of the deadbolt sliding open. I had locked that door. I had checked it twice. The bolt moved anyway. The door opened. I heard footsteps in the kitchen, slow, deliberate, moving toward the hallway. I looked at the deadbolt on the study door. I had locked it. I had checked it. It was sliding open. I moved without thinking. I crossed the room, grabbed the doorknob, and held it still. The deadbolt continued to move, not because someone was manipulating it from the outside, but because it was sliding on its own, drawn by something that did not need hands. The bolt completed its journey. The door was unlocked. The knob turned in my grip. I held on. I planted my feet. I resisted. Emergency protocol, E key. Speak the following words aloud. This room is occupied. I acknowledge your presence. Please withdraw. Repeat 3 times. This room is occupied, I said. I acknowledge your presence. Please withdraw. The knob continued to turn. This room is occupied. I acknowledge your presence. Please withdraw. The pressure increased. My arms trembled. This room is occupied. I acknowledge your presence. Please withdraw. The door began to open. A crack of darkness appeared at the edge of the frame. I threw my weight against it. I slammed it shut. I held the knob with both hands and screamed the words again and again and again. The pressure stopped. The darkness behind the crack retreated. The footsteps moved away down the hallway, through the kitchen, out the back door. I heard the door close. I heard the deadbolt slide back into place. I collapsed against the study door and stayed there until morning. At sunrise, I did not check the doors. I did not verify the colors. I did not refill the water jugs. I walked directly to the detached garage where my car had sat for 137 days, unused. I got inside. I turned the key. The engine started on the first try. I drove down the gravel driveway to the mailbox. I stopped there and got out. In the mailbox was a final envelope. I opened it. Mr. Carver, we observed what happened last night. We are sorry. The rules have failed. The boundaries have been crossed. What protected your grandfather for 62 years no longer protects you. We advise you to leave immediately. Take only what you can carry. Do not return. If you survive, please send this information to the next person who inherits the property. They will need to know. Thank you for your diligence. Thank you for your observation. Thank you for adding your amendments to the list. Your grandfather would be proud. I looked at the envelope. There was no return address. There never had been. I looked at the farm, the house, the barn, the dairy house, the grain bin, the fields, 160 acres of land that my grandfather had tended for 62 years. I looked at the rules in my hand, 26 amendments and 5 emergency protocols, the accumulated wisdom of 3 generations of survival. Then I got back in my car and drove away. I didn't go far, 12 miles south to the town where I'd bought batteries and bread and the occasional 6-pack of beer. There was a motel there, the kind that charged by the week, and I took a room and paid for 14 days in advance. For the first 3 nights, I did not sleep. I sat on the motel bed with the lights on and the curtains open, watching the parking lot and the road, and the endless Kansas darkness. Nothing came. On the fourth night, exhausted beyond measure, I fell asleep with the lights still burning. I woke at 6:23 a.m., unrested but alive. Nothing had come in the night. No footsteps, no voices, no child crying in the darkness. The rules had been specific to the farm. Whatever existed there had not followed me. Or it had not followed me yet. 3 weeks later, I received a letter at the motel. It had been forwarded from the farm, according to the postmark. Someone had collected it from the mailbox and sent it to me. Inside was a note in handwriting I did not recognize. Mr. Carver, we hope you are well. We wanted you to know that the property has been monitored in your absence. The doors remain locked. The outbuildings remain sealed. Whatever crossed the boundary on November 15th has not emerged since. We do not know why. We do not know if this is permanent. We also do not know if you will return. That is your choice. But if you do choose to return, we have prepared updated protocols based on recent observations. They are enclosed. Please understand, returning is not mandatory. You are not obligated to continue your grandfather's work. You are not obligated to risk your life for property that may already be lost. But someone must watch the farm. Someone must maintain the boundaries. Someone must ensure that what lives there does not spread. Your grandfather understood this. We hope you will understand it too. Enclosed were 6 additional rules. Emergency protocols for situations I had not yet encountered, 27. If the boundaries are crossed during the night, they may be restored by sunrise. Remain away from the property until full daylight. Approach cautiously. Verify that all doors are closed before entering. 28. If you observe the dairy house glowing during daylight hours, do not approach for any reason. Contact the nearest neighbor and request assistance. 29. If you observe multiple figures in the fields during a single night, do not attempt to count them. Do not attempt to track their movements. Remain indoors and wait for dawn. 30. If the voice that claims to be your grandfather begins providing accurate information, details about your life that only your grandfather would have known, do not trust it. This is a sign of advanced mimicry. Increase your vigilance accordingly. 31. If you encounter something inside the house that you cannot identify, do not engage. Proceed immediately to the cellar, red door, and lock yourself inside. The cellar is the only room in the house with no exterior walls. Remain there until morning. 32. If all other protocols fail and you cannot reach a safe room and you cannot escape the property, face the threat directly. Look at it, acknowledge it, speak aloud. I see you. I know what you are. You have no power over me. This final protocol has never been tested. We do not know if it will work. But your grandfather believed that recognition was a form of power and that denial was a form of vulnerability. We hope you never need to test this belief. I stayed at the motel for 6 weeks. I took a job at the hardware store in town, the same store where my grandfather had bought his supplies for 62 years. The owner, Ray Whitfield, remembered my grandfather well. He did not ask why I had left the farm. He did not mention the rules. But he looked at me sometimes with an expression I recognized. The same expression Harold Munsey, the lawyer, had worn when he'd handed me the envelope. They knew. Everyone who had lived out here long enough knew. They just didn't talk about it. In January, I received another letter. Mr. Carver, the farm requires attention. The contract crew that harvests the wheat has reported that certain sections of the field have stopped growing. The boundaries of the dead zones correspond exactly to the path the footsteps take during the new moon. Additionally, the well has run dry. This has not happened in the 73 years since the well was dug. We believe it is significant. We advise you to return and assess the situation. Daytime only. Do not remain after sundown. If you choose not to return, we will understand. But we believe your grandfather would want you to see what has become of his work. I read the letter twice. Then I drove to the farm. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late January. The sky was gray, the wind was cold, and the wheat fields were brown with winter dormancy. I parked at the end of the driveway and walked the rest of the way. The house looked the same, white clapboard, green shutters, wraparound porch. The front door was closed, the windows were intact. But the ground around the house had changed. A path had been worn into the earth, a circular track, perhaps 3 feet wide, that circled the entire perimeter of the building. The grass had been trampled flat, the gravel had been scattered, the soil beneath was compacted as if by thousands of footsteps. I stood at the edge of the path and looked at it. I did not step onto it. The barn was 53 yards away, or it had been 53 yards away. I measured it with my rope. It was 41 yards now. The dairy house was 80 yards away, or it had been. It was 68 yards now. The tree line was 138 yards from the barn, which should have made it approximately 190 yards from the house. I could see it clearly from where I stood. It was less than 100 yards away. The boundaries were shrinking. I walked the property for 2 hours, measuring distances, taking notes. Everything my grandfather had documented was shifting inward. The buildings were closer to the house. The tree line was closer to the barn. The well was in the same location, but the ground around it had sunk, creating a depression that collected water when it rained. The dead zones in the wheat field were exactly where the letters had described them. Perfect circles, perhaps 20 feet in diameter, where nothing grew. I counted 7 of them, arranged in a pattern that matched the path of the footsteps around the house. The dairy house door was closed when I approached it. The padlock was intact. I checked it twice, but the glow was still there. Faint in the daylight, barely visible, but present, a luminescence that came from within the stones. I did not open the door. At 4:15 p.m., with the sun already beginning to descend toward the horizon, I returned to my car and drove away. I did not return after sundown. On February 1st, I moved back into the farmhouse, not because I wanted to, not because I was no longer afraid, but because the letters had made clear what my grandfather had understood. Someone had to watch. Someone had to maintain the boundaries. Someone had to ensure that what lived here did not spread. The rules had failed once, but failure did not mean abandonment. It meant adaptation. My grandfather had adapted for 62 years. He had watched the patterns shift. He had added amendments as necessary. He had held the line against something that could not be fully understood. I would do the same. I arrived at sunrise on a Tuesday. I checked every door. I verified the colors. I measured the distances. The path around the house was deeper now. The buildings had not moved since my last visit, but the tree line had. It was 87 yards from the house, measured directly. I opened my grandfather's journal and added a new entry. February 1st, return to property. Boundaries continuing to shrink. Tree line now 87 yards from main house. Footstep path approximately 6 inches deep in places. Dead zones in wheat field unchanged. New protocols implemented. Will not enter upstairs after 1:45 p.m. to ensure adequate time to reach first floor before 2:15 a.m. window. Will not approach dairy house under any circumstances. Will not verify distances after dark. Will continue observation and documentation until conditions change or survival becomes impossible. I put down the pen and looked out the window at the wheat fields. The sun was rising. The sky was clear. The wind was still. For now, everything was quiet. It's March now, 3 months since I fled. 1 month since I returned. The footsteps circle the house every night, not just during the new moon. The path around the foundation is 8 inches deep. I've stopped measuring. The tree line is 71 yards away. I can see it from my bedroom window without straining. The voice that claims to be my grandfather speaks to me every night. Last week, it told me about a summer afternoon when I was 7 years old, visiting the farm, eating ice cream on the porch, while my grandfather talked about the wheat. The details were accurate. The memory was real. I did not respond. I covered my ears and hummed and waited for sunrise. The child has stopped crying. I don't know what that means. I don't want to know. Yesterday, I found the study door open when I woke, even though I had locked it and checked it twice before sleeping. Nothing was damaged. Nothing was missing. But on the desk, arranged in a neat stack, were all 32 rules and protocols I had written. I had not put them there. I did not move them. I left them where they sat. Tonight will be another new moon. The footsteps will be louder, longer, closer. The voice will be more persuasive. The boundaries will continue to shrink. I have prepared my amendments. I have reviewed my protocols. I have accepted that this may be the night when the rules finally fail completely. But until they do, I will follow them. I will document what I observe. I will maintain the boundaries for as long as possible. And when I can no longer stay, when the tree line reaches the porch, or the footsteps enter the house, or the voice finally says something I cannot unhear, I will leave these notes for the next person who inherits this place. They will need to know what works. They will need to know what has stopped working. They will need to understand that the rules are not complete, that they have never been complete, and that survival requires not obedience, but observation. My grandfather understood this. Agnes Whitmore did not. The difference between them was 62 years. I hope I have more time than that. But I know I might not. The sun is setting now. I can see it through the kitchen window, dropping toward the horizon, painting the wheat fields in shades of orange and gold. I have checked every door. I have drawn every curtain. I have retreated to the study with my candles and my flashlight and my stack of rules. Tonight will be another night of listening and waiting and not responding. Tomorrow, if I survive, I will add another entry to my journal. And someday, when I am gone, by choice or by force, someone will find these documents in the mailbox at the end of the driveway. They will read my grandfather's rules. They will read my amendments. They will learn what I have learned, that the land remembers, that the things which live here are patient, and that survival is possible if you pay attention. The rules are keeping me alive, for now.